Today, I'm going to synthesize how living the liberal arts has manifested the liberation of Black women through their spiritual and artistic expressions. I will examine how the liberal arts evoke this sort of liberation for Black and Brown women by being literally liberal in the sense of liberating or freeing a marginalized group from oppression, as well as by way of being anti-racist, and it has proven successful in provoking critical thought processes that have liberated many marginalized groups for generations before us, and I'm sure generations to come. I would like to do this through the examination of the 1997 film East Bayou, and I want to examine this through the lenses of the Dominican tradition in the pursuit of truth, as well as its faithful practices with the application of the multiple intelligences theory. I also want to discuss how paradigm shifts exist in both of these facets and how they continuously aid the Dominican tradition and multiple intelligences on the pursuit of truth. I'm also going to apply my own personal and educational liberal arts experiences to my synthesis and to the themes discussed in the film. To briefly review, the Dominican Charism practices and the pursuit of truth is defined by the Dominican Charism booklet as the unique gift or charism of the Dominican family is a passion for truth, a passion pursued through communal study and contemplation and expressed in works of preaching and teaching. I'm going to directly correlate each of these principles I have listed here with these instances of multiple intelligences that I have listed on the other side. Summarize Eve's Bayou. It's a 1997 sort of an eerie film. It has really intense themes of African American spirituality, sexual assault, womanhood or becoming women, relationships, both romantic and familial, and truth and memory. For Spirit, it's written and directed by Kaiser. And I chose to use this movie for the synthesis because I think it is the perfect movie to discuss living the liberal arts and really examine all these facets of the liberal arts that I identified in my synthesis. I grew up watching this movie, and it's the sort of movie every single time you watch it, you're going to have a new analysis, a new paradigm, and many different shifts throughout the course of the journey. So the Dominican Charism booklet defines promoting the arts as work reveals God as beauty as well as truth, and whose teaching awakens the creative gifts. This facet of the Dominican tradition and faith practices can be directly linked to linguistic and spatial IQ, as this is the intelligence responsible for the creation and expression of art. It's also responsible for the critical thinking to be able to analyze and appreciate the art. So as we know, people create art to express their pain, their joy, and just talk about their experiences overall. However, Black women specifically tend to talk about the oppression that they face to seek liberation. By telling their story, they are able to achieve this liberation, and the people who experience their art and get to appreciate their art also experience liberation as well. I want to give a special mention to Nina Simone, Toni Morrison, and Maya Angelou because these are some of the Black women who have expressed art that have liberated me. Nina Simone was a victim of emotional and mental abuse in her relationship. And by listening to her, I was able to free myself from a similar situation. Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou addressed sexual abuse, specifically of young girls. So that's something I've also experienced. So by reading their works, I've been able to further be able to unpack and analyze what has happened to me. So in all, the promoting the arts aspect and the linguistic and spatial IQ would be Kaisi Lemons, featured here as the writer and director of the movie. The movie itself is the promoting the arts and the creation of that spatial and linguistic IQ. The Dominican Charism booklet discusses building community as the search for truth is not solely an individual pursuit. Professors, scholars, researchers, and learners seek understanding together as a community. This can be directly related to interpersonal IQ, as this is the intelligence that is responsible for building community and understanding with other people. I also wanted to note that paradigm shifts play a key role in fostering relationship building with people. So throughout the film, we have a few paradigm shifts between the characters and their relationships. To begin, we have Eve and Cicely, who are sisters. They begin the film competing for their dad's love. It is clear that Cicely is the favorite. She is a daddy's girl. So ultimately, Eve spends the movie trying to figure out how to sort of get in her dad's good graces, which begins when she catches her father in the middle of infidelity. And she begins trying to form that relationship by holding his secrets. In the end, the sisters ultimately end up forming a union against him when Cicely reveals to Eve the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her father. Cicely and Louis, which is the father, begin with a very loving, very prideful, deep connection between father and daughter relationship. Cicely can often be noted covering up for her dad or taking up for her dad when he falls short, when he's caught in another infidelity. Whereas at the end of the film, there is so much fear and shame. This is a girl who would wait up for her father to come home at night. And by the end of the film, she won't even let her dad look at her to examine her. And he's a doctor. Roz and Louis are married, husband and wife. They do not have a paradigm shift that exists explicitly within the movie, but I just wanted to touch on her acknowledging her paradigm shift briefly after a woman calls and announces her affair with her husband. She says to Moselle, "When I first met Louis, I said to myself, here's a man who could fix things. He's a healer. He can take care of me. And then I find out that he's just a man." And I think that was a great quote, and I love it so much because I think that perfectly encaptures how a lot of women, specifically Black women, end up feeling about their men in emotionally abusive relationships. And lastly, we have Eve and Moselle, who are auntie and niece. They both have the gift of sight that has been passed down through their ancestor, and they continuously have paradigm shifts with each other back and forth throughout the movie as they understand each other's life stories and what they're enduring in the moment, as well as getting glimpses into their relationships with other people to understand the issues that were going on in the family. The nurturing and contemplative spirit practice of Dominican Charism says that Dominican educational practices encourage students to sharpen their vision, to look beyond the surface, to probe the depths of all creation and of all they encounter. This can be directly linked to naturalistic and existential IQ. So naturalistic IQ is attuned to nature and the environment. We can see this in the movie through African American spirituality or hoodoo that is commonly practiced throughout the film. Hoodoo is an African American spiritual practice. It is created by our ancestors, the slaves. So essentially, this was their way of being able to practice their homeland's spiritual beliefs under the guise of Christianity. So Moselle has the gift of sight, and she is a root worker or a conjure woman for a reading. We're introduced to this when she has clients coming in to get readings, and she does a mojo bag, what we call a mojo bag, and hoodoo, essentially to draw and attract money. Eve seeks Elzora to practice some black magic, which ultimately is going to lead to her father's death later on. I myself am a personal hoodoo practitioner and root worker. My background here is just the uplifting spell that I did on myself. And as you can see here, I have my Nina Simone pins because I like to pay homage to Nina Simone because once again, I feel that she helped free me from emotional and mental abuse. Continuing with the nurturing of a contemplative spirit, we have the existential IQ, which is a deeper curiosity for life and existence. So the gift of sight is an ancestral gift that is passed down through a common ancestor. And the people in the movie, Eve and Moselle, are the ones who have it now. Eve discovers her power when she has a dream about her uncle, and when she wakes up, he ends up dying. So throughout the movie, she begins to understand and sort of try to control her gift to see how she could really use it to her benefit. Moselle ultimately feels oppressed by her curse as a Black widow, as every husband that she has dies. So I find it really admirable that she can practice confident humility, as noted in Adam Grant's Think Again, by admitting her ignorance that although she has the gift of sight, she really can't see what's going on with herself. She ends up having a vision sometime in the movie that locks the children away in the house as they're afraid that harm will befall them. And she's featured here with Eve in this lower picture after Cicely, the picture at the top, moves away after being assaulted by their father. And she says there has to be some divine point to all this, because all this tragedy has been happening to her family and she cannot understand what is going on. At this point, she attempts to read Eve's palm, and this is the point where she realizes that Eve also has the gift of sight. However, it's hard to analyze this part, because if you watch it, you can see we don't really know if she could see what Eve knows, or if Eve is so powerful that she can't read what Eve has in her mind. Lastly, the Making Connections of Dominican Tradition says it is tempting to deal with the surfeit of information by cutting it down, separating it, dichotomizing it, and dividing our intellectual pursuits into disciplines and departments. If we do so, we often lose sight of the essential connections among them. Information is important. Knowledge is essential. And inspired wisdom leads us to shared truth and social justice. So at the end of the movie, everything kind of makes sense to all of us, as intrapersonal IQ is a sense of deep self-awareness. Eve sort of begins to really develop this in the family as she harnesses her power, and we as the viewers begin to put pieces together. It's the vision that Moselle had earlier, where they thought harm would befall the children, essentially was her having the vision of her brother's murder. Eve also has many full circle moments and reflections by this end of the film. She contacts Elzora to do some sort of voodoo black magic to kill her dad. And Elzora says to her, people have a way of dying at their own speed. And although Eve did use conjure to kill her father, his murder was ultimately brought upon himself by his own infidelities and scheming and cheating and lying to people is what brought the violence to his life. Eve also finds a letter from her father Louis after he has died to her aunt Moselle, denying the assault claims of Cicely. So Eve confronts Cicely and attempts to read her, but there is no clear indication on if what Cicely says is true or if what Louis is saying is true. And when Eve pulls away, Cicely starts crying and she says, I don't know what happened. I don't know. And that essentially is how the film ends. I wanted to play the ending poem, The Thread of Stories, that says, like those before me, I have the gift of sight. But the truth changes color depending on the light, and tomorrow can be clearer than yesterday.
Descendants of Eve and Jean-Paul Baptiste. I was named for her. Like others before me, I have the gift of sight, but the truth changes color depending on the light, and tomorrow can be clearer than yesterday. Memory is a selection of images, some elusive, others printed indelibly on the brain. Each image is like a thread, each thread woven together to make a tapestry of intricate texture. And the tapestry tells a story, and the story is our past.
My final analysis is that the pursuit of truth is a continuous journey through paradigm shifts, and we can link it to Dominican faith practices as well as multiple intelligences. And the film Eve's Bayou perfectly illustrates how Black women liberate themselves through these multiple intelligence and using Dominican faith practices to live the liberal arts to express them both spiritually and artistically.